someone else's comment is unlikely to bring you to a halt unless you value that comment. So imagine you're going to pursue a goal, but you're full of doubts. And so 40% of you is doubts and 60% of you is pursuing the goal. And then 5 or 6 people object, and they object using the doubts. Well, that's going to be really hard on you.
So how do we overcome self-doubt?
Well, partly what that means is you probably haven't thought it through completely. Like, what are you doing? And why? And if you have a bunch of doubts and they haven't been addressed, then you're vulnerable at that point. And it may be that your goal is not everything it could be. And it may be that your strategy isn't fully fleshed out. And so you have to have a conversation with your doubts and take them seriously and see if you can construct a goal that you're on board with. And then a doubt pops up because someone criticizes you. It triggers a doubt, and you look at the doubt and you think, okay, here's the doubt, and this is why what I'm doing, maybe won't work. But then you think, but this, I've thought this through, and I've thought this through, and I've thought this through, and that all works. And so, no, that isn't going to stop me. So I look and I think, well, I'm writing something. Why? Well, I want to figure out this problem. I want to think about this problem. Why? Well, it's an engaging problem, but it's a problem that many people seem to have, so that discussing it and figuring it out seems to be useful. Why? Well, because the more of us who take problems seriously and try to address them and communicate about them, the fewer problems we might have and the less suffering there'll be. And suffering doesn't seem to be a good thing, unnecessary suffering. Maybe we could work towards it, and maybe that's what I should be doing, and that seems to be what's ethical, and that's it. And you might say, well, what if you doubt that doing what's ethical is right? Well, it's not that easy to construct an argument that supports the idea that having more unnecessary suffering in the world is good. So I would say, you want to put yourself on firm moral foundations. And people talk about morality all the time. This is what you should do, or you're a bad person. It's arbitrary. It's got this ring of patriarchal tyranny. But that's based on a misapprehension of what morality is. It's like, do you want to be tortured by your conscience? How pleasant do you find it to be tortured by your conscience?
It's horrible.
How horrible? Is there anything worse?
Excruciating, yeah. I don't know if there's anything worse.
It's up there.
You got to live with it, yeah, for as long as you have it.
Yeah, well, I think that's a universal experience, or near universal experience. So you live ethically when you're not violating your conscience. Well, there isn't anything better than that. That might not be good enough. It might not even be good. Let's say you manage it. Things can still come along and take you out sideways. But the purpose of living ethically is so that you have some peace. Look around for something that bothers you and see if you can fix it. So now you think, well, let's say you go into you can do this in a room. It's quite fun to do it just when you're sitting in a room, like a room, maybe your bedroom. You can sit there and just sort of meditate on it and think, okay, if I wanted to spend 10 minutes making this room better, what would I have to do? And you have to ask yourself that, right? It's not a command. It's like a genuine question. And things will pop out in the room that there's a stack of papers over there that's kind of bugging you, and you know that maybe a little order there would be a good thing. And, there's some rubbish behind your computer monitor that you haven't attended to for 6 months, and the room would be slightly better if it was a little less dusty and the cables weren't all tangled up the same way. And if you allow yourself just to consider the expanse in which you exist at that moment, there'll be all sorts of things that'll pop out in it that you could just fix. And, I might say, well, if you were coming to see me for psychotherapy, the easiest thing for us to do first would just be to get you to organize your room. You think, well, is that psychotherapy? And the answer is, well, it depends on how you conceive the limits of your being. And I would say, start where you can start. If something announces itself to you, which is a strange way of thinking about it, as in need of repair, that you could repair, then, hey, fix it. You fix 100 things like that, your life will be a lot different. Now, I often tell people, too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial, right? You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do. Hands down. All you have to do is do the arithmetic. You figure it out right away. So, 100 adjustments to your broader domain of being, and there's a lot less rubbish around and a lot fewer traps for you to step into. And so, that's in keeping with Jung's idea about erasing once you've got your mind and your emotions together, and once you're acting that out, then you can extend what you're willing to consider yourself and start fixing up the things that are part of your broader extent. Now, sometimes you don't know how to do that. So you might say, imagine you're walking down Bloor Street and there's this guy who's like alcoholic and schizophrenic and has been on the streets for 10 years. He sort of stumbled towards you and, incoherently mutters something. That's a problem. And it would be good if you could fix it, but you haven't got a clue about how to fix that. You just walk around that and go find something that you could fix, because if you muck about in that, not only is it unlikely that you'll help that person, it's very likely that you'll get hurt yourself. So, just because while you're experiencing things announce themselves as in need of repair doesn't mean that it's you right then and there that should repair them. You have to have some humility. You don't walk up to a helicopter that isn't working and just start tinkering away with it. You have to stay within your domain of competence. But most of the time, if people look at their lives, it's a very interesting thing to do. I like the idea of the room, because you can do that at the drop of a hat. You go back to where you live and sit down and think, okay, I'm going to make this place better for half an hour. What should I do? You have to ask. And things will just pop up like mad. And it's partly because your mind is a very strange thing. As soon as you give it a name, a genuine aim, it'll reconfigure the world in keeping with that aim. That's actually how you see to begin with. And so if you set it a task, especially, you have to be genuine about it, which is why you have to bring your thoughts and emotions together, and then you have to get them in your body so you're acting consistently. You have to be genuine about the aim, but once you aim, the world will reconfigure itself around that aim, which is very strange. And that, man, if you can get one thing through your head as a consequence of even being in university, that would be a good one. You see what you aim at. And so, because one inference you might draw from that is, be careful what you aim at, right? What you aim at determines the way the world manifests itself to you. And so if the world is manifesting itself in a very negative way, one thing to ask is, are you aiming at the right thing? Now, I'm not trying to reduce everybody's problems to an improper aim. People get cut off at the knees for all sorts of reasons. They get sick, they have accidents. There's a random element to being, that's for sure. And so you don't want to take anything, even that particular phrase, too far. You want to bind it with the fact that random things do happen to people. But it's still a great thing to ask. Some things bug you, and other things don't. I mean, there's lots of things that could bother you that don't, because you're obviously not bothered by everything that you could be bothered by, right? There's lots of things in the world that aren't set right. But some of them really bug you. Maybe they make you cynical and bitter, Oh, God, look at how the world is constituted. It's so awful that I can't sustain my faith in the sight of that. It's like, well, you've got something to do there. guy, that's your problem. Why? Who knows? I would say the reason is that it's your destiny calling to you in the form of guilt over unfulfilled obligations. You have an instinct for growth. That's not a mystical statement. It's part of being human. We don't reach the limits of our potential. We're neotenic in some sense. We're continual children, biologically speaking. And so we're always transforming and changing in some direction. What direction? Well, your conscience tells you, at least in part, this bugs you. Well, it's your problem. Now, you may have to investigate that and straighten it out, because even your formulation of what bugs you is likely to be ill-constituted. But still, that's something calling to you. And you avoid it at your peril, and everyone else's peril, too. And it is, see, that's the way that your biology manifests itself in such a sophisticated manner. It's beyond you. It's like your better self is attempting to manifest itself by torturing you with a set of problems that you need to address. And then you can refuse that, but then all the meaning goes out of your life if you do that. That's not good. We're developing something now to help people turn problems into goals. I have a problem. Well, sure you do. Okay, what's your problem? Okay, well, how do you turn that into a goal? So that's so interesting if you think about it that way, is that that's your goals, your problems. What should I do with my life? Well, what problems do you have? Well, there you go. Solve those. I'm not being flip about this. That's where the answer is to be found. That's not happiness. And happiness has those problems you already described. You know, it's got this now focused impulsivity, and you know, I've been hard on happiness as a pursuit, and perhaps too much so, because I haven't had very much happiness because I've been so ill for the last while, and you know, it's possible that I've undervalued it. Perhaps not, but it's possible. In any case, if it comes along, you're a fool if you don't welcome it. But it's still not the proper pursuit. I suppose to some degree it's not deep enough.
It's from a lecture that you gave, and it's written on my wall over there, and it's, don't practice what you do not want to become.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have a corollary of that too that works in relationships. Do not punish what you want to have happen. So here's an example. Imagine that you've married someone that you find attractive, and then imagine that other people find that person attractive as well, and that's actually somewhat threatening to you. And then instead of dealing with the fact that you're threatened by the very thing that you were attracted to and that you're blessed to have, you start to punish the person that you're with when they manifest themselves as attractive. Well, you do that for 10 years and the attractive person is no longer there. And then you're going to be angry at them even though it was completely your fault. You know, because if you punish someone for the manifestation of a desirable virtue, it really hurts them. And because people are, you know, it's so interesting to watch what happens when people stop me on the street, especially if they're shy and maybe somewhat damaged. They want to tell me about something good they've done. But they're very hesitant about it because their experience has been that if they reveal something good they've done, they either get ignored or punished. And so they don't want to do it. They're afraid. But if they do it and then they get a reward, well, they're unbelievably happy about that. But that's a good example because it's very common for people to experience punishment for their virtue. And, you know, you can do that with your kids, too, if you're jealous of them. I mean, maybe you have a kid who's really bright. He's brighter than you. It's like, are you so sure you're happy about that? And how do you know that you're not going to punish that child because you're jealous And if you think you're not that sort of person, well, you should think again, because people are that sort of people. And perhaps you can train yourself not to do it, but envy is a pretty common human emotion, and the probability is that you're reasonably prone to it. But so one of the things I learned again from animal behaviorists, Skinner in particular, Skinner believed that he's the psychologist who was most famous for learning experiments with rats. He believed that the best form of discipline, so if you wanted to train an animal to do something, was reward. You waited till the animal did something that approximated what you wanted, and you immediately rewarded it. So maybe he would train a rat to climb a ladder and then walk across the top of a ladder down another ladder. And well, he just watched the rat, and whenever the rat went near the ladder, he'd give it a food pellet. And soon it was near the ladder all the time. And then being near the ladder, it would put a leg on a front paw on one rung. Bang, food pellet. Well, soon the rat was going like this. And then the next thing it was going like this. And a good animal behaviorist can train an animal to do an amazing thing, any number of amazing things. In your intimate relationships, if you watch the people that are around you and then you see them doing something that they should do more of, and I don't mean this in a manipulative sense, because hopefully if you have any sense, you're rewarding them for something that would also be really good for them. And you say, look, I saw you do this, and that's really good. Do more of that. It's like, man, you're just opening up the pathway for that person to deliver what you want. If you'll admit what you want, if you'll reward it when it happens, if you pay proper attention, if you think you deserve what you desire, if you think your ideals are worth pursuing, if you have any faith in yourself. All those things have to be explored and answered, but it's unbelievably powerful. And that's all dependent on, moral orientation and the capacity to pay attention.
If the thing that's pulled you through over the last 18 months to 2 years has been meaning and purpose and something less ephemeral and less fleeting and grander and more written into the source code of your being than happiness, then I think it's as life boys.
It's been love too. It's been responsibility for sure, but it's definitely been love. A lot of people have taken care of me, and I also wanted to be around them. I wanted to be around because I love them. And I think that's why the second book has a more communitarian element too, because so many people have been so helpful, and also because I've seen even more clearly how much of what's sustaining is derived from love. Love and duty, that's pretty good. Duty in some sense is the cold equivalent of love. It's love shorn of its warmth. It's what you should do, and it's necessary, and there is tremendous meaning to be found in that. But love has this maternal comfort and warmth that duty lacks. First of all, I think it's really worth thinking about what success means, and I try to do that a lot in both the books. It's really fun to make other people successful. This is one of the reasons capitalism, I would say, gets a really bad rap, and an unfair rap. Like the people I've known who have been successful in the capitalist enterprise, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs, rather than managers, let's say. It's just that's the population I've been exposed to. And this was the same among the professoriate, for that matter. One of the great pleasures the people that I've seen who I respect took was in mentoring. And so don't underestimate the radical satisfaction that's associated with helping other people develop. One of the reasons that good professors, and good businessmen love to be in the position they're in is because they can identify young people who are promising and open up doors of opportunity to them. It's really intrinsically motivating. And so, when you think of capitalism, for example, or success as only a competitive enterprise, that's a real mistake, because there's that aspect of it that's there everywhere, in every enterprise I've ever seen. So Success, real success means you're successful in a way that makes other people around you successful. You need both of those. And that's also really good for your conscience, because then you're not working at the expense of anyone else. Quite the contrary, right? You're lifting the tide that lifts all boats, and maybe you're simultaneously elevating your own relative status, but it's not unreasonable to put that in as a constraining requirement. It has to help other people while it helps you. And I would say the way we're wired, now some people are more selfish than others, but I would still say human beings are unbelievably social and reciprocal. That's built into us at an incredibly deep level. And it can go wrong, and we can get cynical and malevolent and bitter and work at counter purposes to it. But to be of service to your fellow man, your family members, your broader community, there are virtually no pleasures that compete with that. So, and so that's partly why it is useful to do a critique of mere materialism. And materialistic satisfactions are pretty fleeting. They're not non-existent, but they don't have the deep and lasting satisfaction of successful mentoring, for example, and the relationships that build out of that. So I don't think there is any success at all without moral success. In fact, I think that success without moral success is actually a form of torture. You know, if you don't, let's say you don't feel you deserve anything, because you know that you're not being a good person, and that's your own judgment. And let's assume that you're accurate. You're not, because some people will judge themselves far too harshly. But let's just say, you have reasons to have your conscience bothering you, and you're not successful. Well, at least you don't feel the continual injustice of that. You think, well, I'm a son of a bitch, but I don't have anything. But then let's say you're successful. Well, that's all ill-gotten. How can that do any? And then maybe you have to rationalize constantly to live with it. Everything you collect around you is nothing but a source of torment and a constant reminder that you're criminal in your fundamental orientation, that you've ruined people on your mad scramble to the top. Jesus, you don't want that. You seriously don't want that. And no amount of relative material status is going to even come close to rectifying that. You want your conscience to be clear. You want your interpersonal relationships to be honest. You want to be reliable and dependable. And if you can add exciting and adventurous to that, so much the better. But to be successful means to be good. You really are your only comparison group, especially as you get older, because your life is so idiosyncratic and peculiar that look, you have to care what other people think. It's stupid to think otherwise, because you have to be social and you have to be aware of what other people are doing and all of that. So this is psychopathic individuality, but it is genuinely true that no one has your set of opportunities and limitations. And so the comparison just isn't real. It can't be sufficiently multidimensional. Because maybe you see someone who's rich. I've met many people who are very, very rich. And you can look at their lives, and they have these huge houses and material plenty, and they're shielded from many catastrophes that would hit someone without those resources harder. But their lives are still full of exactly the same troubles that characterize human life in general. And so you compare yourself on one dimension. You don't see, well, the person's worked 80 hours a week for 40 years and it's blown all his relationships out of the water. It's like, yes, he's rich, but he's also old now. He's 60. And one of the best predictors of wealth is age. Really, do you want to be young and poor or old and rich? It's like, I'd pick young and poor, because you can't buy youth. And so, and that's something that's worth considering. But you don't know what burdens the people you're jealous of are carrying. So leave it be. It's not helpful to you to be envious. Who knows what price you pay for hyperspecialization? And I learned that looking at, power mad C-suite types. Well, first of all, they're generally not power mad, because power is actually an unbelievably unstable way of establishing authority. You get slaughtered if you're not reciprocal in most reasonably functioning organizations. And if you're in an organization that only rewards the exercise of power, the probability that that organization is going to fail in totality is extraordinarily high, because it's a tyrannical organization and it'll lose touch with its customers. So the C-suite types, they're working nonstop. Corporate lawyers in New York, they make $700 an hour, but they work all the time. And there are people who are suited for that, but it isn't obvious that that's for everyone, or that it should be, or that it's even desirable. Now, it's a temperamental issue to a large degree. Many of those people are hyper-conscientious. And so if they'll work, wherever you put them, what they would do is work. That's who they are. And it's biological as well. It's not all biological, because traits are affected by learning and by environment in complex ways. But a huge chunk of it is that you're born like that. And that has advantages and disadvantages. So conscientiousness is a good example. It's a good predictor of long-term life success. But people who are conscientious tend to tear themselves apart if they become unemployed, for example. Sometimes you get laid off. You worked hard, but you get laid off. Well, people who are conscientious will tear themselves into pieces with guilt in that situation, because they tend to attribute so much responsibility to themselves. And so there's a price to be paid for conscientiousness. It opens you up to a certain set of vulnerabilities. So, and you might be somewhat unbearable to your family too, because all you ever do is work. You think, well, you want to be you want your father, maybe your husband, perhaps your wife, to be a good provider, but you want them to do that at the expense of everything else.